Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. This post is from the subreddit Relationships and it's by user childfree stepmom 1. Me, 32 female, child-free, but my husband, 35 male, wants a child even though he had known for years. Okay, I'm child-free but I have kids. Actually, two amazing stepkids. Scott, 11 years old, and Vinny, 15 years old. I met their father Billy from a shared friend. I kept seeing Billy at social events, same circle of friends. We found we had a lot in common and we became friends before we started dating. Actually, I was hesitant about the idea of dating Billy because he was divorced and had kids. I was child-free, but he convinced me to take it slowly and see how it progressed. I told him that I never wanted to be a mother, nor will I be a mom in any future, and I would never replace their mom. He seemed to be okay with it, so we dated for nearly 2 years. I found his kids sweet since they still lived with their mom. Then we got married and unfortunately, their mom fell terminally ill and passed away 8 months after diagnosis. Scott and Vinny moved in with us. They were 7 and 11 years old when their mom died. It was hard, especially with grief-stricken children. I'm not proud to say that I considered leaving Billy a few times, but I made a vow to my husband and promised myself to see this through, to see if I can do this, to see if I can love them. It took a while, but with the help of therapy, lots of sports, piano practices, and a few other distractions, the kids were on the way to healing. And surprisingly, I took motherhood okay. At least I think so, since they call me mom sometimes. Now, about 10 months ago, Billy asked me if I still thought of myself as child-free. I told him a part of me still is, but that didn't seem the right term since I have kids. Granted, his kids, but I was raising them with Billy. I was watching them grow into amazing people. After that, he asked me if I wanted a kid of my own. I told him no, that hasn't changed. I never wanted to be a mother even though I am. I asked him what this questioning was all about. The next thing took me entirely by surprise. Billy told me he wanted to have a kid with me. I gently made it clear to him that that wasn't possible. Then he responded by telling me this might be a deal breaker. I was shocked and couldn't stay calm, and we ended up having a loud argument after that. The next few days after the conversation, I walked like a zombie, terrified that our marriage might end abruptly. I tried to talk to my husband a few times and he told me, "Give me time and space to accept it and I'll tell you about my decisions later," or any variation thereof. I had a panic attack the following week and I tried reconsidering having a baby. I tried to convince myself that it won't be so bad since I'm doing a good job with Scott and Vinny and I love them so much. They're so smart and creative that sometimes it surprises me where their mind goes. It's nothing but amazing. The youngest is so sensitive and sweet and I just want to hug him until my arms get tired. That said, it's hard, really hard. I know if there was another life where someone presented me with the choice to have Billy and his kids or just Billy and no kids, I'll pick the latter, and I feel so guilty for having those thoughts, so guilty and angry at myself. I begged Billy to go to couples counseling and finally he relented. Our sex life was inexistent. He didn't want to touch me and vice versa. I rechecked my birth control. We were basically roommates in an uncomfortable situation. And do you know what is the ironic part? Scott, Vinny and I were as close as can be because I found comfort and happiness through them while the gap between my husband and I grew bigger. I just didn't know how to fix it. Couples therapy seemed to work, at least I thought so, until my cousin, who is a divorce lawyer, called me to see if we were okay. That he saw Billy at his firm where his partner took his case. I couldn't say a coherent word. He tried to console me while I cried, but I ended up hanging up and calling my husband. And you know what he said? I was covering my bases. I was furious, so furious that I wanted to break his things, but I held myself back. I was seeing red. Months of being withheld affection, months of thinking it was all my fault for being so uncompromising, despite that he's known about my child-free stance for years, and that hasn't changed. Months of loneliness and self-doubt, months of trying to work on my marriage and getting nothing. I was tired of all of it, so I found a divorce lawyer from another firm through my cousin since he couldn't represent me due to a conflict of interest. I checked with my lawyer about child custody and he assured me I had 50-50 since I legally adopted them not long ago because despite everything, I still want to be a part of their lives. Then I began the divorce proceeding. After serving the papers to Billy, it was like an 180-degree change of attitude. He begged me not to go through it. He apologized for everything. He said that he had this fantasy of me being swollen with a pregnant belly and thinking that kid is mine, and he got caught with it. He said he wasn't trying to pressure me, just his way of coming to terms with not having a kid with me, both of our genes. He said a lot of things, but I felt it was all too late. Not only that, I felt he was playing with my emotions, treating our marriage like a game. I don't know, should I give him a second chance? I can't think this clearly and I am overwhelmed by the whiplash of emotions. I'm staying with my mom for 2 days for a breather. I want to stay, but not in that limbo. What should I do? Okay, OP, so you met this guy, you told him you were child-free, but he convinced you to date him anyways even though he has 2 kids and see how it progressed. You fell in love with those kids and then you adopted them. And even though all of that is awesome, you are still child-free by choice. However, apparently your husband is not listening to you or thought he could change your mind down the road. And that's the thing, this is a conversation that should have happened just the one time and then you should have said if you ever changed your mind and that's about it. But in order to try to get you to do what he wanted, he pushed for divorce and then when you went through with it, he chickened out. This whole emotional roller coaster that you've been put through was for him to come to terms with the fact that he wasn't getting another kid, even though he knew from the beginning that you were child-free. I don't think that someone who truly loves you would put you through that, or else it would just be really selfish of them. And that's because I believe that you shouldn't put people through emotional stress just to deal with your own crap. OP, the only way I see your relationship working out is if you can get past the betrayal. And I would think you guys need a professional for help with that. And what do you guys think about this whole situation? What would you do if you were in OP's shoes? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. Switch009 says, so, it's pretty clear that he was trying to browbeat you any way he could to force you to acquiesce to his demand. Calls it a deal breaker, demands space, goes to counseling. Understandable so far, but here's where he gets manipulative. Withholds sex and intimacy, refuses to talk, lets relationship deteriorate, and goes to see a lawyer at your cousin's firm so it would definitely get back to you. He's been torturing you, hoping that being miserable and in fear of losing him would be enough to force you to cave and give in to motherhood, something he's known all along you don't want. Now he's backpedaling hard because he didn't think you'd throw in the towel yourself. He was just trying to play a game of chicken. Doesn't sound like a guy you should stay with, in my opinion. And OP responds, he's not devious, more oblivious of someone's feelings. I wish he was cruel, so it would be easier to leave. I don't know, I could be wrong. It all came out of the blue. He gave me no indication or any hint of desire wanting another kid. In fact, he said after divorce he never wanted more, which is why I dated him in the first place. We were on the same page. I just wish he told me long before all this mess. Lost My Cookie 90 says, no. He went knowingly to your cousin's office, knowing you would receive a heads up. Go through with the divorce and continue being an awesome child-free adoptive mom. And OP responds, he did know where my cousin worked and what kind of firm it was. I was the one who gave Billy's friend their information because she was thinking of divorce after Billy asked me if I knew any lawyer to help her. That was a year ago. When we were dating, my cousin was at my wedding and they met long before that. It's pretty safe to say my husband knew it. That's why I was so furious. Probably Good Advice says, if you think you want to give it another shot, marriage and individual counseling. Maybe the divorce papers were enough to give him a reality check. Either way, you both need professional help to get over this. At the very least, it'll help you get over the divorce if it becomes clear that you and he can't get past this. Additional information from OP's comments. I can't stay with my mom for longer than 2 days. I can't leave the kids alone for a long time. They're coming back from camp soon and I'm the one who takes care of them during the day while Billy cares for them at night due to work. That said, I'm currently looking for an apartment within my price range because I need time to process this and I can't think right if I live with my husband. I need to be rational with this and not let my fear of living without Billy overrule me. I hope I'll pick the right choice in the future. Also, in case you're wondering, I'm not giving up my kids. Never. I know that I have a choice. I choose them because they didn't do anything to me. They didn't choose me to be a mom, but had me anyway. I don't want them to lose another mom, and I never resented them even though I daydream of a life without them, hence the guilt. It's different now. I love them. I hope they choose me to share their lives if I divorce their father. I'm scared they'll resent me for going through with this. I'm not going to say anything to them because nothing has been decided. Alright, well, the community gave OP some different things to think about, and hopefully she will, and OP will not let go of her kids. She's willing to go through a divorce, but she wants to stay in their lives, which I think is awesome. Anyways, it's time to move on to the update to see what happened next and how the story ends, but before that, of course, here's another one of my playlists for you to enjoy after the video. Now let's move on. It's been almost 3 months since my post, and I have great news. We're still married! I'm pregnant! Yay! Just kidding. Actually, we're getting divorced instead. By the way, heads up, this will be long. So, after I posted on Reddit, I went back home from mom's and I tried to act normal for the kids. My marriage might be a mess, but it didn't have anything to do with them and I didn't want to disrupt their routines. A few weeks later, I sublet a place from a friend who decided to travel for a few months. The sublet helped me a lot mentally and emotionally. I stayed there most of the night to sleep after work, while the day was spent mostly with our children and life. It was sort of an escape, although it was lonely. Billy conceded to the sublet, but he didn't have the choice to refuse either because I think he realized he had overstepped. His behavior did change after I accepted and began divorce proceedings. He was saying, asking, and doing the right things, respecting me more than before, giving me space at the right moment, and being there when I needed it. It was as if he linked to my thoughts and catered to them while ignoring his. I knew he was doing those things because he felt guilty or he was afraid to lose me, although this behavior wasn't the reason that convinced me to work on our marriage. First, I love him and I love our kids. I love our lives together, our house, and everything that entailed. Second, this was the first real strain of our marriage, not the second or the third strike. Sure, we had problems before, but it was mostly minor, so I decided to give him a second chance with the idea of divorce still alive and just paused to see if we could resolve this particular dilemma. We did many different couples counseling, mostly because we were changing therapists and counselors since most of the ones we encountered were biased. We could tell most of them were on my side, except one who was on his. I knew we needed a neutral party because it was about a partnership and not assigning blame. It took us a while to find one and a rather expensive one, but this counselor was worth it. In our session, we hashed our thoughts out in the open. Mine was easier to broadcast because I had a list written down, things I thought were worth asking since some of you pointed out some interesting theories about Billy having a pregnancy fetish which never occurred to me. It gave me dismay. I even had nightmares about it. Thankfully, when I asked him about it during the session, he was horrified and sort of grossed out. He didn't even think that fetish even existed. He explained that it wasn't like that he wanted to have a part of me and a part of him together. He wanted to see our child grow up to see if he or she would be curious, inquisitive, mischievous, and so on. Billy had this image of the child growing up to be a scientist like me with my physical features and personality, but he was just playing with an idea. He didn't really care what the child would be as long as he or she was happy. He wanted a symbol of our love where it could be seen, interacted with, felt, touched, and nurtured. A child was that symbol for him. It was a lovely idea, but it was an idea I wasn't getting on board with and said as much to Billy. I said I never wanted a child because I never felt any kind of desire to become a mother. There was no longing or deep ache that it would hurt me not to have a child. I told him that bringing a child into a world while his or her mother didn't want to have him or her was unfair to the child and that there was a real and high possibility that I wouldn't love her or him if I compromised. Billy couldn't believe me since I fell in love with his kids. I told them that while I love them, it was because I had to learn how. It wasn't instinctive or biologically driven. I gave up too much of my autonomy for him and his kids. I gave up my dream of traveling, and I gave up my hobbies and nearly all my friends because I was so busy managing my job, our kids, errands, and responsibilities that I didn't even have time for myself. I gave up my freedom and privacy. Our sex life was often disrupted because we were too tired or exhausted, or our kids were knocking at our bedroom door for something. I told him having a baby was different because it meant giving up my identity, the only thing that was left of me, the only thing I could keep, and if I compromised, it wouldn't be me anymore. I was nearly 100% sure I would come to resent my own child for that fact only. I told him when he mentioned his deal breaker, it made me feel like he didn't care about my feelings after I told him many times that I never wanted to have one. The way that Billy went about it, asking for space without talking and then going to my cousin's firm that works divorces, felt manipulative. Billy admitted he did go to my cousin's firm knowing that it would get back to me, but he went there because he had decided of going through a divorce, not to be manipulative. He said not having a child hurt him and he didn't want to resent me but was beginning to. He felt rejected, as if I never wanted him to be a dad for my own child, or rather I thought of him as a terrible father in any form. But now he knows it was irrational and stemmed from his hurt and insecurities. He's dealing with it with his own therapy. Also, he went there because it would have forced his hand to commit it. It was a fail-proof plan for him, except it didn't work. It was really stupid of him because he couldn't do it even with the threat of me finding out about it. Not devious, just incredibly stupid. I was heartbroken when he told me this. I just don't know which is worse, since it hurts to find out Billy's reaction after our conversation about kids was to go to a divorce lawyer with the intention of going through divorce without talking to me first. I think a small part of me would have preferred devious because it meant he didn't give me up right away. Despite our sessions, Billy didn't seem to understand why I didn't want to have a kid. He said that it was instinctual, that it's deep down in our biology to have one or two, and he found it a strange concept of living in a childless world. He just didn't get it, and then he hits me with this bombshell. When we were dating, he said he was okay with me being child-free because he honestly thought he didn't want more after his first divorce, but he didn't actually believe me. He thought that I eventually would change my mind and worried instead about the when, but decided we'll deal with that later. Then, when our kids moved in after their bio-mom's death, he saw how good I was with them and he couldn't help but imagine having another child, this time with me. He said he kept hoping for any sign, any glimmer that I shared his feeling. He waited for years for me to talk about reconsidering my stance on kids until he couldn't, and that's where the trouble began. After that session, I felt defeated. I don't know how to explain it. It was like a huge part of me went blue screen of death until it rebooted in safe mode. I was on autopilot, interacting with the world because I had to, while another part of me wanted just to hide away forever. My counselor was the one who noticed it after a few sessions and asked me for another one, just by myself, so I went there alone. My counselor said that he was worried for me because he saw clear signs of depression, and that wasn't good if I didn't let anyone know about it. He was afraid that I wasn't dealing with it, and then he asked me a few questions in hypothetical scenarios that made me realize we weren't compatible anymore, and while it might hurt to realize, it didn't mean that it was going to hurt forever. I sort of broke down after that, cried for a long time until the tissues ran out, and then my counselor had her receptionist drive me home because honestly, I was a wreck. I didn't go to my place. I asked her to drop me home to talk to Billy. I asked him if we didn't have another child, could he see me in his life at any point in the future without resentment and bitterness? I told him to really think about it. I think he didn't want to admit it. I think he was like me. He didn't want to give us up because we love each other too much, and for a time we were happy. We were really happy, until we weren't. Divorce was back on the table, and this time we go through it without struggle or fight. We agreed on 50-50 custody and splitting our material possessions and financial matters in half, except for a few personal things. We decided to sell our house, and I'm looking for a permanent apartment, and Billy is also looking near the boys' school. Everything seems to be rather anticlimactic. We're afraid to tell the kids about the divorce. I think it will be the hardest thing we might ever do together, next to telling Scott his mom wasn't coming back. I'm scared Scott and Vinny wouldn't want me anymore to be their mom, and I'm hoping so hard that it won't be the case. Billy assures me that won't happen, but he can't know that for sure, and sometimes I get angry at him for putting me through this situation, or I get angry at myself for being child-free. I get angry a lot. I'm thinking of taking a sabbatical soon. I know I have a long way to go and the divorce hasn't been finalized yet. I'm hoping everything will be okay after that. Thanks for the advice. Well, it's not a happy update, but it is a positive one. And OP, I'm sure the kids won't, banish you or anything like that. Now, regarding your shopping around for therapists because they were all biased towards you, that wasn't because they were looking for somebody to blame, but that was because of accountability and taking responsibility. And this was all Billy. But that doesn't matter anymore because in the grand scheme of things, you guys are already going through the divorce. So here's wishing you all the best in the future, OP. I think this is the right choice for both of you. Take care and thank you for sharing. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.